Hello everyone, I welcome you all to the next lecture of EC Board's NCERT Simplified Series for Class 10. In today's lecture, we are going to discuss the chapter How Do Organisms Reproduce, where we are going to deal with the reproduction in different groups of organisms. This chapter is a lengthy chapter unlike other chapters. This consists of large number of topics. First one is the process of variation and heredity in different organisms. Second, we're dealing with the process of asexual reproduction, where we'll deal with the process of fission, fragmentation, budding, spore formation, vegetative propagation, and so on. Then we'll be dealing with the process of sexual reproduction in flowering plants, followed by the process of human reproduction, and then we're discussing about the birth control strategies and the sexually transmitted diseases. So let's get started with the chapter. So first we are going to discuss about heredity. Now what is heredity? Heredity is defined as the degree of similarities between parents and offspring. So if you look at your parents and yourself, you can see that the basic body plan of both of you will be similar. Similarly, if you take a dog and a puppy, you can see that the basic body plan in both of these organisms is exactly the same. Now this body plan is similar because both of you is having the same genetic constitution, and this genetic constitution is maintained by a molecule which is known as deoxyribonucleic acid, which is DNA. And the DNA sequences in two different organisms is nearly the same. That is the reason why the body plan of two organisms of the same species looks exactly similar. However, there are some variations that is happening due to the process of DNA copying. So during the process of DNA copying, what happens is there are certain processes that is happening. One is known as crossing over. Crossing over is the exchange of genetic material between two sister chromatids. The details of crossing over will be dealt in class 11th. So as a result of crossing over, some of the genetic material will get transferred from one arm of the chromosome to another arm of the chromosome. And after that, the process of fertilization will again results in the mixing and variation of different characters. So variations are due to two main reasons. One is due to crossing over, and another reason is known as mutations. Mutations are sudden heritable changes which happens in the sequences of DNA or RNA, and these changes which is happening in the sequences of DNA or RNA will ultimately result in the formation of a different protein, and the formation of different protein will decide whether a character is of a particular type or of another type. So we have different types of proteins which are present in our cell, and these proteins are responsible for the various characters. Like some people are having blue colored eyes, some are having black colored eyes, some are having brown colored eyes. So this color of the eye is decided by a particular protein which is known as rhodopsin. Similarly, different types of proteins are there which is helping in the formation of different characters. So this formation of proteins is affected by the genetic constitution of the organism in terms of the DNA. And changes in DNA can be brought about either by the process of crossing over, or it can be due to the process of mutation. Mutation are sudden heritable changes which happens in the sequence of an organism, DNA sequence of an organism. Now, why are these variations essential? Variations are essential so that there can be evolution. So variations in species is necessary for the survival of different species and for the evolution of new species. So now let's start with the process of reproduction. Reproduction is the process of producing new organisms which are similar to the parent organisms. The process of reproduction is broadly of two types on the basis of the number of organisms which are taking part in the process. If only a single parent is involved in the process of reproduction, then it is known as asexual reproduction. And if two parents of opposite sex or gender are involved in the process of reproduction, then we call it as sexual reproduction. Asexual reproduction is seen in lower group of organisms, whereas sexual reproduction is seen in higher group of organisms, especially in plants as well as in animals. Asexual reproduction is seen in bacteria, protista, and certain fungi. And also you can see it in some lower plants as well as some higher plants also. Asexual reproduction is rare in animals, but there are some organisms in animals also which can show asexual reproduction, like the planaria. So now let us study the details of asexual reproduction. The first one that we are going to study is the process of fission. Now, the basic principle of asexual reproduction is cell division. A single cell is going division, and as a result of which multiple cells are produced. Either it can be two cells or it can be multiple cells. This is the process of cell division, and cell division is the basic process of asexual reproduction. So let us see how the process of asexual reproduction is carried out in an amoeba. So initially we have a parent amoeba. Now this parent amoeba is going to divide. So when it is going to divide, the first step is that the elongation of nucleus is going to happen. So we know that in every cell there is nucleus, there is cytoplasm, and there is plasma membrane. So this nucleus is going to increase in its size and ultimately results in the division of nucleus. And the process of division of nucleus is known as karyokinesis. So I'll write over here. First step is the karyokinesis, which is the division of nucleus. After karyokinesis, now there will be two daughter nuclei which are present inside the same cell. In the next step, what happens is that the cytoplasm is going to divide, and this process is known as cytokinesis. After cytokinesis, cytoplasm is going to divide, and now this is going to split up into two daughter cells. So ultimately, after the process of binary fission, we will be getting two daughter cells. So this is the common method of reproduction which is seen in microscopic organisms like amoeba, paramecium, euglena, etc. So here you can see the entire process. In step 1, karyokinesis is going to happen, that is the division of nucleus, followed by the division of cytoplasm, which is known as cytokinesis, and then it is a formation of two daughter cell. It's a very simple process. However, some organisms like the malarial parasites, that is the Plasmodium vivax, is going to show another type of fission which is known as multiple fission. Here what happens is the parent cell, it consists of the nucleus. This nucleus divides in number. It divides into very large number of nuclei, and these nuclei is now enclosed inside a structure called as cyst. So large number of nuclei are there, and these nuclei are now going to be present inside a cyst or a cavity. And when the condition becomes favorable, this cyst is going to break out, and as a result of which the daughter cells are released out into the surrounding medium. So this is what is happening in the case of multiple fission. In multiple fission, more than one nucleus is formed, more than one daughter nuclei is formed, and that is going to divide out or burst out and release large number of daughter cells to the surrounding medium when the conditions become favorable. And the formation of these many daughter nuclei is during the unfavorable condition. Cyst is a protective covering that protects this particular parasites from the unfavorable condition. Now let us see the next type of asexual reproduction, which is known as fragmentation. Now fragmentation is usually seen in filamentous algae like the Spirogyra. So here what happens is Spirogyra is a filamentous algae, and this filamentous algae is going to split into large number of small fragments, and each of these fragments will now get converted into a single organism. This is known as fragmentation. Now this Spirogyra is a plant, and plant is considered as a higher organism. So now a question may arise, why can't all higher organisms undergo the process of fragmentation as a method of reproduction? Well, dividing the complete body into different fragments and growing of each fragment in an individual organism is extremely impractical, right? We have trillions and trillions of cells in our body, and every cell cannot divide, and every cell cannot give rise to a new human being. So since that is not a practical way, we have adopted complex elaborate mechanisms that is known as sexual reproduction. So fragmentation is limited to lower groups of plant, especially in the algae. Let us now talk about another method of asexual reproduction which is seen in animals, which is regeneration. Now regeneration is different from reproduction because it does not happen throughout the life cycle. It does not happen every time, and it does not happen with every cell of the body also. So both are different. Regeneration and reproduction are different. However, if a body of a planaria is cut into different fragments, then each of these parts is going to regenerate into a complete organism. A single part that is removed out is going to get converted into a complete organism. We have seen regeneration in lizard also, but that is not a method of reproduction. But here in planaria, regeneration can result in the formation of a complete organism. That is why in planaria it is going to act as a method of reproduction. So in some organisms, regeneration can be a defense mechanism like the lizards, but in some other organism, it can be a process of reproduction as well. Moving on with the next process, that is the process of budding. Now, bud is an exogenous structure which is produced on the body of a parent organism. So here you can see a small outgrowth which is coming out from the parent hydra. Now what is going to happen? This parent hydra, this outgrowth that is coming out from the parent hydra is now going to develop further into a bud. And ultimately what is going to happen when this bud is matured, it is detached off from the parent body and now it is going to get converted into a new organism. This is known as budding. So budding is a process in which a portion of the parent body is getting converted into an outgrowth called as bud, which develops, matures and finally detaches off from the parent body and develop into a new organism. This is known as budding, and that happens in organisms such as hydra as well as yeast. Yeast is a fungi and hydra is an animal. Now let us talk about vegetative propagation. What is vegetative propagation? Before we start about that, let me discuss about the parts of a plant. Vegetative reproduction is a method of asexual reproduction which happens in plants. So first of all, let us look at the parts of a plant. In a plant, there are some vegetative parts and there are some reproductive parts. The vegetative parts of a plant includes root, stem, and leaf. And the reproductive part is the flower. So if a new organism is formed from any of the vegetative parts, that is from the root, stem, or leaf, then it is known as vegetative propagation. So let us see some of the different types of vegetative propagation. Here you can see the leaf of a plant which is known as bryophyllum. So you can see that new plants are formed from the notches of the leaf. These are known as the notches of the leaf. So from the edge or the notches of the leaf, new plants are formed, new plantlets are formed, and these plantlets will get converted into new plants. So this is an example for vegetative propagation via leaves. Next, another one is the process of cutting. Now in the case of rose plants, what do? Is we are cutting a portion of the stem, and this cut portion of the stem is planted in soil or compost, and enough sand is put over there, and the process is continued for a longer duration. That means we are cutting different parts of the plant, that is different stem parts, and that stem parts is planted in different containers, and we are going to take care of these stem plants so that it gets converted into a new plant. It does not dry off, it will get converted into new plants. Roots will form from there, shoot will also develop from there, and it will get converted into a new part. So that is a method of artificial vegetative propagation. Another method of artificial vegetative propagation is the tissue culture. So what is tissue culture? For tissue culture, what do? Is we are taking a part of a plant. A part of a plant which can give rise to the complete plant is known as an explant. It can be a cell, it can be tissue, or whatever. Now we are going to place this explant in a nutrient medium. Now when we are placing it in the nutrient medium with enough nutrients that is required for the growth of a plant, it will get converted into an undifferentiated mass of cells, and this undifferentiated mass of cells is known as the callus. This callus later gets converted into a tiny embryo which is known as embryoid, and later it gets converted into mature embryo. This mature embryo is then planted in a test tube, and enough amounts of auxins, cytokinins, gibberellic acid, etc. is added into the solution, and as a result of which a plantlet is formed. Now once the plantlet is formed, it is planted in certain containers and it gets converted into a mature plant. This process is known as tissue culture. So tissue culture is widely exploited by the gardeners so as to get the desired plants. So this is another method of vegetative propagation which you see in plants. So next method of vegetative reproduction is the spore formation, which happens in the rhizopus. Now what is rhizopus? Rhizopus is nothing but bread mold. If you are keeping the bread in open, you can see that after a few days there is some black patches which is found on the bread surface. This is nothing but due to the formation of rhizopus. Now this rhizopus have large number of sporangia. Sporangia are heterogeneous structures which consist of large number of spores inside it. During favorable condition, these sporangia will burst, releases a large number of spores to the exterior, and these spores are carried by air currents. And when it finds a suitable surface to land, this will land on those surface and it is going to give rise to a new rhizopus. So this is the process of spore formation or sporulation in rhizopus. This is another method of asexual reproduction. So we have seen the different methods of asexual reproduction. So let us have a quick recap of the various methods of asexual reproduction. First one was the binary fission, which we see in amoeba. Second one was the multiple fission, which we see in plasmodium. Third was the fragmentation, which was seen in spirogyra. Fourth was regeneration in planaria. Fifth was budding in hydra and yeast. Next was vegetative propagation in plants. Next was the process of tissue culture, that is artificial vegetative propagation and also cutting. Then another one is layering, another one is grafting. All these are the different methods of artificial vegetative reproduction and vegetative propagation. And natural methods includes runner, rhizome, sucker, tuber, offset, bulb, etc., about which we will be studying in class 12th. And after that we studied about the spore formation in rhizopus. So with this we are concluding the process of asexual reproduction in different groups of organisms. Now coming to the next topic, that is the sexual reproduction in higher organisms. Sexual reproduction is mainly seen in plants as well as in animals. However, certain lower organisms also shows the process of sexual reproduction. Bacteria does not show the process of sexual reproduction. Instead, they show a primitive type of sexual reproduction without the formation or fusion of gametes, but there is simple transfer of genetic material between one bacteria and another bacteria. That means if one bacteria is having a genetic material, that is getting transferred to another bacteria without the fusion or formation of gametes. This type of reproduction is known as parasexual reproduction, also known as sexual combination or recombination. That is the process that is happening in bacteria. Whereas in higher organisms like plants and animals, the process of sexual reproduction is extremely elaborate and it consists of basically three different events. First event is known as the pre-fertilization events, second is known as the fertilization events, and the third is known as the post-fertilization events. Now what are the events which are coming in the pre-fertilization events? The key event in sexual reproduction is fertilization, which is the fusion of the male and female gametes. Now, what is the peculiarity of gametes? Gametes are single-celled and these are produced by a parent organism by the process of meiosis. So, this is the only cell in our body which is produced by the process of meiosis. All cells in our body are produced by the process of equational division, which is mitosis. That means our cell is having, each and every cells in our body is having 46 chromosomes. So, when these cells divide, we will be getting another cell which is having 46 chromosome. The process is known as mitosis. However, when the cells which are present in the gamete mother cell, when they divide, the 46 chromosome containing cell is now going to form two cells with 23 chromosomes each. So this process is known as meiosis. So meiosis is also known as reductional division. So gametes are formed as a result of the process of reductional division, and that is the peculiarity of gametes. So there is two gametes. One is from the father, that is known as the male gamete, which is having 23 chromosome, and another is coming from the mother, which is again having 23 chromosome, and upon fertilization the chromosome number is again restored to 46. So that is the process of fertilization. During the process of fertilization, the number of chromosomes in the organism is again maintained. If this is not maintained as 46, then there can be large number of complexities. Like if it is 45, certain diseases can happen. If it is 44, some other disease can happen. That we will be studying in class 12th in genetics. So now we are going to study how the process of sexual reproduction happens in plants as well as in humans. So to study the process of sexual reproduction, first we have to study the organ which is involved in the sexual reproduction in flower. That is the flower in plants. So first let us look at the structure of a flower. So here you can see that a flower consists of two sets of whorls. Whorls means parts. So the first set of whorl is known as the accessory whorl and the second one is known as the essential whorl. So what is the meaning of accessory whorl as well as essential whorl? Essential whorls are those which are required for the process of reproduction and accessory walls are those which are attracting different organisms for the process of pollination. So essential walls includes the male reproductive system as well as the female reproductive system. Male reproductive system in flower is known as stamen, and the female reproductive system in a flower is known as pistil. So here you can see the picture of a stamen. So here you can see that there are two parts in a stamen. The first part is known as the anther, that is, this bulged portion is known as the anther, and this portion is known as the filament. So the stack-like structure which is supporting the anther is known as the filament. The pollen grains are produced in the anther, and the pollen grains contains the male gamete. Now, talking about the female reproductive system, that is the pistil. Pistil consists of three parts. The upper portion is known as the stigma. This portion is known as the stigma. Next portion is known as the style, and the third portion is known as the ovary. So inside the ovary there is ovule, and inside the ovule there is egg cell, and this egg apparatus contains the female gamete. So the process of formation of gametes is known as gametogenesis, and the process of formation of male gamete that happens in the stamen is known as microsporogenesis. As a result of microsporogenesis, the cells which are present in the anther, they undergo division and they will be forming the male gamete. That is the process of gametogenesis in male flowers, that is known as microsporogenesis. So the product of microsporogenesis is pollen grain, and this pollen grain is now getting transferred by wind or water, etc. Different types of pollinating agents are there. So as a result of these various pollinating agents, it is now going to reach the female reproductive system, that is the pistil. Now the region of the pistil which is accepting the pollen grains is known as the stigma. So the pollen grains now lands on the stigma, and when it lands on the stigma, there is a process which is known as pollen pistil interaction. Now what is pollen pistil interaction? I will be showing that with the help of a diagram. So here you can see that there is two pollen grains which are landed on the surface of the stigma. Now what happens is that this stigma will identifies one of the pollen as a variant. Now what is the meaning of that? If the pollen grain can cause a variation in the species, variation in the population, then it will accept that pollen, and if it is having the same genetic constitution as that of the female flower or the female reproductive part, then it will reject that particular pollen. This ability is known as pollen pistil interaction, and the complete process of pollen pistil interaction is still unclear to the scientists. So here you can see that if I am calling this as the pollen A and this as the pollen B, pollen A was rejected and pollen B was accepted. Why pollen A was rejected? Because it is having the same genetic constitution or the same chemicals in as that of the female reproductive system, as that of the stigma. So since both of them were having the same chemicals, it will not recognize this particular pollen. However, the pollen B was having some other chemical, so the plant is now going to accept it. The stigma is going to accept it because now the stigma is sure that if a pollen tube is formed from this, it can give a male gamete which can cause a variation, and that variation can lead to evolution of the species. And every species on earth is looking for natural selection, which is the survival of the fittest organisms on earth. So for the survival of fittest, it is extremely essential that the pollen should bring in variation. So it is going to identify that pollen which is going to carry out variation, and that pollen is accepted, and then the accepted pollen is going to form a pollen tube. Now this pollen tube is going to go through the stigma, then to the style, and finally it is going to enter into the ovary via an opening which is known as the synergid. Now, specialized structures which are present in the egg apparatus, that is known as the filiform apparatus, which are finger-like projections, guide the entry of this pollen tube into the ovary. Now inside the ovary we have the female gamete, that is the egg, and egg is present in the ovary. So if I look at the structure of the ovary, you can see the egg apparatus, that is the ovule inside, and I am going to draw the structure of an ovule. An ovule consists of different apparatus. It is an 8-celled apparatus. It's a 7-celled apparatus which consists of synergids, antipodals, and polar nuclei. So here these two are known as synergids. This one is known as the egg apparatus. This is known as the polar nuclei, and these two are known as the antipodals. So now the pollen tube is going to enter via the synergids, and it is going to discharge two male gametes per pollen grain. One of these male gamete is going to fuse with the egg, and the process is known as syngamy. The process is known as syngamy, that is known as fertilization. So fertilization is also known as syngamy, that is the fusion of the male and the female gamete. So the first male gamete is going to fuse with the egg cell, and the second male gamete is going to fuse with the polar nuclei. And please do note that all these cells are haploid. That means they are having only half the number of chromosome. So if I am denoting this by N, this is also N, this is also N, this is also N. So these two are combined. So polar nuclei was having a ploidy of 2N initially. Now what happens is that a male gamete, again with a ploidy N, is going to fuse with a cell which was having a ploidy of 2N. So that results in the formation of a triploid cell. A diploid cell plus a haploid cell on combination will form a triploid cell which is having a ploidy of 3N. And another one which was egg, which was haploid, that now fuses with another sperm which is again haploid, and that results in the formation of a diploid zygote. So after the process of fertilization, two events have happened. One is the process of syngamy, that is the fusion of one of the male gametes with the egg. And the second process was the fusion of a sperm with the polar nuclei, and that is known as triple fusion. So after these two events, that is syngamy and triple fusion, there is formation of a polar nuclei. This polar nuclei will get converted into an endosperm, and this is going to get converted into a zygote. So the products that is coming after the process of fertilization are zygote, as well as another one is that is formed from the polar nuclei, that is the primary endosperm nucleus, which is known as the PEN. So let us quickly recap the process of fertilization once again. What happens is the anther is going to release the pollen grain, and this pollen grain is now going to the stigma. From the stigma, a pollen tube is generated, and this pollen tube is going to reach till the ovary. Inside the ovary, it is now going to the ovule, and inside the ovule there is the egg as well as the polar nuclei. A single pollen grain consists of two male gametes. One of these male gametes fuses with the egg and results in the formation of zygote. This is known as syngamy, and another process is the fusion of one male gamete with the polar nuclei. That results in the formation of primary endosperm nucleus, which is PEN, and that PEN is triploid. The processes triple fusion and syngamy together is known as double fertilization. So this is a unique event in angiosperms of flowering plants. The process of double fertilization happens only in angiosperms of the flowering plants, and it consists of two steps. One is known as the process of syngamy, and another is the process of triple fusion. The product of triple fusion is the primary endosperm nucleus, which later gets converted into an endosperm, which is a nutritive tissue which is required for the growth of embryo. Zygote get converted into embryo, so this embryo gets nutrition from the endosperm, and it gets developed into a seed and then into a fruit. The ovary is getting converted into a fruit, and the ovule is later getting converted into a seed. So this is the process of reproduction in plants. So what was the pre-fertilization events? Pre-fertilization events was the microsporogenesis and the megasporogenesis, and the transfer of the male gamete into the female reproductive tract. That is the process of pollination. Fertilization happened. It included two events. First one was the syngamy, and another one was the triple fusion. In the post-fertilization events, we have seen first one was the endosperm development, second was the embryogenesis, that is the formation of embryo, followed by the formation of fruit and seed. So these were the events which are included in the process of sexual reproduction in a flowering plant. So once we understood the process of sexual reproduction in flowering plants, let us note down the post-fertilization changes. Post-fertilization changes. Most important change is that the zygote gets converted into embryo. Ovule gets converted into seed, and ovary gets converted into fruit. So this can be asked in the examination. Now fruit can be formed either from the ovary. Sometimes it happens that the fruit is not formed from the ovary, like in the case of apple. Then it is known as a false fruit because it is formed from the thalamus. That is the base part of the swollen base part of the flower is known as the thalamus. So if the fruit is formed from this thalamus or any other part other than the ovary, then it is known as a false fruit. So example is apple. Now let us talk about the process of human reproduction in detail. Just like the process of plant reproduction, human reproduction is again an elaborate and a complex process. It is again divided into three phases. First phase is known as the pre-fertilization events, second is known as the fertilization events, and the third is known as the post-fertilization events. In the pre-fertilization events, there is formation of gametes as well as the exchange of male gametes into the female reproductive tract. Formation of gametes is known as gametogenesis. In males, it is known as spermatogenesis, and in females, it is known as oogenesis. Next is the process of transfer of the male gametes into the female reproductive tract. The process is known as insemination. Next event is the fertilization, and then comes the post-fertilization events, which includes the formation of embryo, the process of implantation, the process of pregnancy, gestation, and parturition, which is the delivery of the baby. So we are going to study the process of human reproduction in detail. So first of all, we have to study about what is adolescence. Adolescence is a period of life which is acting as a transition period between childhood and adulthood. Early adolescence starts at the age of 11 and ends at the age of 14, and at this particular at this particular period of time, it is a time of rapid pubertal changes. And what are the changes happening, that we'll be studying in the next slide. Middle adolescence, that is between 14 to 16 years, and this marks the completion of the pubertal changes. And in the late adolescence, that is between 16 and 18 years, the young person achieves full adult appearance and anticipates assumption of the adult roles. So now we are going to study what are the changes that is happening in boys and girls as a result of puberty. First one in boys is the body size. The change in body size, especially in the length of the arms, legs, hands and feet, and also the deepening of the voice because of the formation of Adam's apple. Next is the formation of hair, facial hair, pubic hair, as well as axial hair, that is body hair. Next is the changes in skin, especially the formation of pimples. Next is the process of erection of penis. Next is the formation of sperms, begins at the age of puberty, and there can be a change in the body shape as well. Now the remarkable changes in girls during puberty includes a sudden change in the body size. There can be formation of hair, especially in the body as well as in the pubic region. There can be changes in the skin. There can be excessive production of sebum. That results in the formation of pimples. Menstrual cycle starts to begin, and the first menstrual cycle in females is known as the menarche. Now there can be enlargement of breasts, and also there can be a change in the body shape. So large number of changes are happening in both boys and girls as a part of sexual maturation towards an adult life. So listing all of these are the various changes which are happening in boys and girls. There is growth of testes and scrotum, pubic hair development, body grows taller, hair develops under the arms, on the face, body, arms and legs. Oil glands in the skin produces more oil, which can lead to pimples and acne. Penis grows, sweat production increases, muscle growth happens, and the voice deepens. Now talking about the girls, the breasts grow, pubic hair develops, body grows taller and curvier, and the hips widen. Hair develops under the arms as well as on the arms and legs. Oil glands in the skin produce more oil, that leads to pimples. Menstruation begins, and the sweat production increases. So these are the various changes that is happening in both boys and girls during puberty. Now let us talk about the male reproductive structure. The male reproductive system is again for convenience divided into three parts. First one is known as the primary sex organ, which is the site of formation and production of gametes. Second is the secondary sex organ, which includes certain ducts as well as glands, which is aiding in the transfer of gametes. And third is the external genitalia, through which the gamete is extracted out from the human body. The primary sex organ in humans is the testes. Now you can see that the testis is well protected inside a sac which is known as scrotum. This scrotum is acting as a thermoregulator. How is it acting as a thermoregulator? During summers, the scrotum relaxes, thereby regulating the body heat. And during winters, it contracts so as to keep the testis warmed, because the temperature that is required for the process of spermatogenesis is nearly 34 to 35 degrees Celsius. So it always should maintain this particular temperature, and for the maintenance of this temperature, the scrotum is extremely essential. Now, testis is the site for formation of male gamete, that is sperms. The sperms which are produced in the testis is now getting transferred to the outside through large number of ducts. These ducts and certain glands which are associated forms the part of the secondary sex organ. So let us study what are the different ducts which are included in the process of sperm transfer. First is the rete testis, then comes the vas deferens, then comes the epididymis, then comes the vasa efferentia, and then comes the ejaculatory duct. So these are the different ducts which are included in the transport pathway of sperm. First, starting with the vas deferens, then it is epididymis. Next portion is known as vas deferens. Next is known as the ejaculatory duct. So these are the different parts which are included in the secondary sex organ in a male. Now, what are the different glands which are included and what is their function? The glands which are included in the male reproductive system includes the prostate gland. Here you can see the prostate gland. You can also see bulbourethral gland, that is these two glands, and also there is a pair of seminal vesicle. You can see a single prostate gland. This is known as the prostate gland. This is known as the prostate gland. Two are there. This is known as the second one, that is known as the, so I'll mark it over here. This is the seminal vesicle. This is the seminal vesicle. This is known as the prostate gland, and this is known as the bulbourethral gland, also known as the Cowper's gland. So the sperm which is coming out from these epididymis and vas deferens now mixes with the secretions of these three glands, that is the seminal vesicle, prostate gland, and the bulbourethral gland. And when it is released out through the penis, which is the external genitalia, it is released in the form of semen. Now semen consists of sperms as well as seminal plasma. So this is the microscopic view of semen. So here you can see seminal plasma as well as sperms. Now seminal plasma consists of certain alkaline solutions to neutralize the acidic effects of urine in the penis. Also there is large number of ions like calcium, sodium, potassium, etc. And also there is fructose, which is providing energy for the swimming of the sperms in the female reproductive tract. So this is about the male reproductive system. Now let us talk about the female reproductive system. Female reproductive system is again divided into three parts. The first one is known as the primary sex organ, which is the site of formation and production of gametes. That is the ovary. So ovary is the site of formation of the female gamete, which is ova. Next is the tubes and the ducts. It starts from the oviduct, which is also known as the fallopian tube, and then it leads to uterus. And this much portion is known as the external genitalia, which consists of the cervix and the vagina. So now we are going to study in detail about the functions of ovary. Ovary is having dual function. First function is the formation of gamete, that is ova, and the second function is the regulation of the secondary sexual characters in female. Similarly, we have seen in males also the testis is having dual function, that is formation of gametes, that is sperms, as well as the control of secondary sexual characters. In males, the testis produces a hormone which is known as androgen, and among androgens, a class of hormones that is known as androgens, among which the primary one is the testosterone. In females, the ovary produces estrogen, that is the primary hormone in females, which is responsible for the maintenance of the secondary sexual characters. Now talking about the uterus. Uterus is also known as womb. It is a pear-shaped organ in which the child is protected for 9 months, that is during the gestation period. It consists of 3 layers. The innermost layer is known as endometrium, next layer is known as myometrium, and the outer layer is known as perimetrium. So endometrium, myometrium, and perimetrium. So endo means always inner. So the inner layer is known as endometrium, and it is this endometrium which undergoes cyclical changes every month, and the process is known as menstruation. So menstruation is a cyclical changes which happens in the life of every woman in every month in a duration of 28 days, and that is due to the changes in the endometrial linings. The next layer is known as the myometrium, which is the muscular layer. Now this muscular layer is important because during parturition or childbirth, this myometrium undergoes vigorous contractions and relaxations that is leading to the expulsion of baby from the uterus. And perimetrium is the outermost layer, and that is necessary for the protection of uterus. Now coming to the next part, that is the cervix. Cervix plus vagina together is known as the birth canal because it is acting as a canal for the expulsion of the baby. The process of insemination results in the transfer of sperms into the female genital tract. So the sperms are now going to swim through the vagina, then to the cervix, and it is going to move through the uterus all the way up to the fallopian tube. So in the fallopian tube, almost at this particular region, which is known as the ambulary isthmic junction, the process of fertilization is happening. So what is fertilization? Fertilization is the fusion of the male and female gametes. So simultaneously the ovum will also be produced and the sperms will also reach at the same site. And after this, what happens? The process of fertilization will happen. That is the fusion of male gametes with the female gamete. And the process of fertilization results in the formation of embryo, and this embryo undergoes a large number of changes that results in the formation of a fetus. Now the fetus is attached to the mother's body in terms of a functional unit. The structural and functional unit which is connecting a child with the fetus is known as the placenta. So this structure which you're seeing over here is the placenta, and this is known as the umbilical cord. This is known as the placenta, and this is known as the umbilical cord. Now let us see what are the functions of this placenta. Placenta is having large number of functions. Number one is temperature regulation and immune function. Number two is hormone production and secretion. It secretes large number of hormones like the human chorionic gonadotropin, estrogen, progestogens, human placental lactogen, and so on. Large number of hormones are produced by placenta. Next is the nutrient uptake and delivery. Next is the maternal adaptations to pregnancy, exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide with the fetus, and also the waste removal. So these are the different functions which are associated with placenta. Now what happens if the egg is not fertilized? Suppose the egg is released but there is no sperm at that particular junction. At that particular case, what happens is no sperm fertilizes with the egg. So the egg will now start traveling all the way in the fallopian tube, then to the uterus, and it will be exiting out from the body through the vagina. So that is happening if the egg is not fertilized. So next is about the menstrual cycle. Here you can see the changes that is happening in the endometrial lining of the uterus. The layer is getting degraded and again it reforms when the process of ovulation is over. Ovulation is the process of release of egg. So after ovulation, it slowly starts forming again, and in the menstrual cycle it ruptures and it is released out through the vagina. Now talking about the sexually transmitted diseases. Unsafe and unhygienic sexual practices can result in certain diseases which is known as sexually transmitted diseases, which is also known as venereal diseases, also known as VD, or it is also known as sexually transmitted infections, STI. So these are the two other names for sexually transmitted diseases. It is also known as venereal diseases as well as sexually transmitted infections. So let us study what are the different types of sexually transmitted diseases. The first one is known as syphilis. Syphilis is also known as pox, and it is caused by a bacteria which is known as Treponema pallidum. So it is a bacterial disease, so it can be cured by antibiotics. Next is herpes. Herpes is caused by a virus which is herpes simplex virus, and it cannot be cured. Next is chlamydia, which is caused by chlamydia trachomatis, which is again a bacteria. Again, it can be cured by antibiotics. Crab loose, which is caused by Pithecus pubis, that is again a parasitic insect of humans, and that can be again treated with lotions. Next is the HIV, which causes the acquired immunodeficiency syndrome, which is the AIDS, which is causing deaths of millions across the globe, and that is again not curable. Next is gonorrhea, which is caused by a bacterium Neisseria gonorrhoeae, which again is a disease which can be cured by using antibiotics. Next is trichomoniasis, which is caused by Trichomonas vaginalis. That is again a bacteria, so it can be cured by using antibiotics. HPV is caused by human papilloma virus. So that is caused due to human papilloma virus. It's again a viral disease, and hence it cannot be cured completely. However, there is vaccination for HPV. However, you cannot cure two diseases. One is herpes and another one is AIDS. These two cannot be cured. So what are the different ways in which HIV is getting transmitted from one person to another person? First way is through unprotected sex. Second is due to the sharing of needles during drug abuse. Third is the transfusion of HIV infected blood. Fourth is the breastfeeding by HIV infected mother. Next is infants born to HIV infected mothers using improper sterilized hospital tools and transplantation of the affected organs. All these can result in the spreading of this particular virus, and this is going to retard the complete immune system, and the production of antibodies is completely restricted, and that causes the death of the patient because the person cannot tolerate even a single fever. So that can ultimately result in the death of the patient. So to stop all these and also to reduce the population in the country, Indian government have passed an act which is known as the National Family Planning. And this national family planning is giving maximum importance for the use of contraceptive devices, which are birth control methods, so as to reduce the population and also to inculcate the importance of sex education among adults and adolescents, and also to reduce these sexually transmitted diseases. So the NFP mainly targets on use of contraceptives. Now what are contraceptives? Contraceptives are those devices which can prevent pregnancy, and these includes the following. The first one is condoms, second is the intrauterine devices, third is spermicides, fourth is calendar rhythm method, fifth is oral contraception, sixth is contraceptive patch, seventh is hormonal ring, contraceptive injection, surgical sterilization, and so on. So we will study at least some of them to have a quiet idea about whatever is there in our syllabus. First one is the condoms. Condoms and female condoms, which is also known as femidoms, are two mechanical barriers which prevents the process of fertilization. That is, the main aim of these devices is to prevent the meeting of the sperm and egg. Condoms are worn by males as well as femidoms are worn by females. Another type of mechanical barriers includes valves and diaphragms. The second type of device is known as the intrauterine device, which are certain devices which are implanted in the uterus. This releases certain hormones, and that changes the cervical mucus quality and thereby retarding the motion of the sperms inside the female reproductive tract. Next is spermicides, which are certain creams which are applied on these mechanical barriers so as to increase the efficiency of those barriers. Next is oral contraception, which are certain pills which can regulate the hormonal levels of different hormones in the body of the female and thereby preventing pregnancy. Next important one is the surgical sterilization. Surgical sterilization is a permanent method of avoiding pregnancy that is adopted by both males as well as females. And males adopt a method which is known as vasectomy, in which the vas deferens is cut and tied. So the sperm cannot reach into the semen. So the semen that is released will not contain sperm and it will only contain seminal plasma. So there is no chance for fertilization if vasectomy is performed. And another one method of surgical sterilization that is adopted by females is tubectomy, and in tubectomy the fallopian tube is cut and tied. So when the fallopian tube is cut and tied, the sperm cannot reach the ovum, and as a result of which the process of fertilization can be avoided, and these can be used to control the amount of children that is born every year. So this brings us to the end of this chapter, that is reproduction in organisms, and also human reproduction. Once again, to have a quick review of this chapter, we started with a discussion of asexual reproduction in different groups of organisms, starting from amoeba. Second, we discussed about the plasmodium. Third, we discussed about fragmentation. Fourth, about regeneration, budding, vegetative propagation, tissue culture, cutting, layering, and grafting. Then we discussed about spore formation, structure of a flower, the process of double fertilization, syngamy, triple fusion, and also we discussed about the post-fertilization events. We discussed about what is adolescence and the adolescent changes. Then we discussed about the male reproductive system, followed by the female reproductive system, about the seminal plasma, about the concept of insemination, fertilization, placenta and the roles of placenta, and we also studied the case where egg is not fertilized, about the menstrual cycle, sexually transmitted diseases, transmission of HIV, and finally we dealt with the birth control strategies. So I hope this video was lecture for revising the complete chapter, and if you like this video, please do like, share and subscribe to the channel. And in the next lecture we will be starting with the final chapter of biology, which is genetics, heredity and variation. So see you again in the next lecture. Till then, goodbye and happy learning.